Hi, my name is Max Dugan. I'm a craft brewer with Urban Lodge Brewing in Central Connecticut, and this is the Open Trail Podcast. Today we're joined by Captain John Medynski of Set the Hook, Connecticut, a charter captain based out of New London, Connecticut, and we're going to be talking all about Long Island Sound and saltwater fishing. Before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to the crew that's here today. Jason, Chris, Jeff, Salma, thank you all for making this happen. All the people at Quast Media, we appreciate you. John, first of all, thanks for being here, bud.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. I'm real excited anytime I get to sit and talk about fishing.
I know you like talking about fishing. The problem is the time constraint, because we could probably talk for the next 6 hours. But
yeah, right.
Let's start from the very beginning. Plug your business so I don't forget, right?
So Set the Hook CT, it's white tackle saltwater fishing charter. We fish out of New London, the eastern Long Island Sound, and pretty much anywhere from the Connecticut River, mouth of the Connecticut River, Montauk, Block Island, but we primarily fish mostly in the eastern Long Island Sound. I'm real excited about the upcoming season. Should start fishing early to mid-May. We start off targeting the spring striper run, then do a good amount of bottom fishing, sea bass, fluke, porgies, and the bluefish come in strong in midsummer. Then come fall, we're back on the stripers and false albacore, and we finish off the year, like to fish all the way up to Thanksgiving for blackfish or tog. Just togs. Yeah, that we had a fantastic fall, and it's almost I don't want to cut my season short, but I'm always looking forward to that in the fall. I'm already looking forward to next fall.
Well, we got spring to deal with first.
Yeah, that's right.
Before we even get into any of that, I just want to touch base on how we met. I work with a good friend of yours, a colleague of mine, Justin, and you got involved through a fundraiser we were having for our local land trust, and you were generous enough to actually donate all expenses paid charter trip as a really big raffle prize for that event. So one, I want to say thank you for doing that. It really shows your generosity and your passion toward conservation, which brings me into basically our first topic. How, as someone who works professionally in the outdoor recreation business, what does conservation mean to you as a whole?
It's really everything. I'm just as much in the conservation business as I am, the fishing business, and I'm protecting, the most important asset to any charter fishing, outfit is if there would be no business without the fish. So, that broad strokes, it's the most important, asset, more important than the boat and the gear and the, anything else.
Yeah.
So conservation has to be at the forefront of the whole operation.
And it is there's one aspect of it that is sort of required by law, right? So there's conservation that's just required by law. You need to stay within the confines of how many fish you can keep, what you can target at what time of year, what size those fish can be. Biologists are studying these things all the time to keep the fishery healthy. But then beyond that, there's your own personal ethic, which you might develop through, I don't mean you personally, the listener or whoever you are in any walk of life, you're going to come to your own terms with what you care about and why you care about it. So how did you, outside of your profession, how did you come into really just caring about resources, natural resources, and the fisheries?
Well, it's definitely, it doesn't take long. Once you start getting into fishing, and you start hearing kind of the discourse on what's going on in the fishing world. And big part of my, fishing focus is the striped bass. And you can't have a conversation about striper fishing without talking about issues that the striper population and the fishery as a whole face.
Yep.
And to really understand that, you got to kind of back up to regulations,
which can be very complicated for a fish. Overall, but it's a fish that moves around a hell of a lot.
Sure.
So from down, you could say Virginia, roughly North Carolina, let's say, up north across the eastern seaboard to Nova Scotia.
Right.
This mass migration of millions of fish. And on top of that, an enormous variable is striped bass are the most targeted freshwater fish by
Saltwater. Yeah, right.
or freshwater, sorry.
Yeah.
Saltwater fish, thank you. The most targeted fish by anglers. So there's an enormous recreational pursuit for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also this commercial pursuit, and you kind of fall in between.
Right.
You're like a little bit of both.
And, to understand, the range of the striped bass and the regulations that how we get to these numbers that seem kind of arbitrary or kind of can be hard to understand if you're focusing on just one area. Like if you only fished in the Eastern Long Island Sound and you never looked outside of, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, you would have a completely askew, perspective of the health of this fishery.
Yeah.
And the way our
even more so, there are people who will stand on the end of one jetty
right
for most of their lives and fish from right there and
And,
have their opinions on how things look from that point of view.
If you went out fishing in May of 2023 in the race, the spot where the Long Island Sound meets the Block Island Sound, it's kind of the nozzle of the Long Island Sound. If you went out even 2 or 3 times in May of 2023, and you based your entire opinion on the health of the striped bass fish stock, you would think, man, striper fishing is better than we've seen in decades. I've caught more slot-sized fish in that period of time than I've seen in my whole life. And you can hear people say that, and that is a wildly incorrect statement to say that the striped bass fishing is better than ever, and the population must be healthier than ever.
But before you move on, sorry, explain, because this is relevant to the whole topic of striped bass, but explain a slot limit quick.
Yep. So the regulation for striped bass starting in 2023 is 28 inches to 31 inches, and it was an emergency action to drop it from the upper limit of that slot from 35 to 31, and that was an emergency action at the beginning of the 2023 season.
Yep. Meaning, so someone who's fishing, just a recreational individual who's out fishing, they can only keep one
fish within that.
If it falls between 28 and 30, I know you know this. I'm explaining it to people who might not, but between 28 and 31, it's a very specific, very small window.
And we arrive at this regulation based on data that's collected through the and I always get this wrong. I always get the acronym wrong. The Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission.
That was good.
So that it right. I've been practicing that all morning. I wanted to bring this up, and it's this commission for all of the Atlantic states from the Carolinas to Maine. Each state gets one representative, and they do things like collect data, assess the data, and then vote to get all of those states' regulations, get
them on the same page.
Yeah.
And so this is like a whole topic, which I love this in general. Each state has its own right to manage wildlife, how they based on the studies of their biologists, they're gonna make regulations accordingly. When you have a fish, like I mentioned before, that moves, or you might have a bird or something that moves wildly between different states, their jurisdiction, for lack of a better word, you're going to have to coordinate with each other to be on the same page. And so with the
Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission.
That's good. They have these representatives who are not only trying to protect the resource, but they're also trying to protect people's interests and the interests of industry, of the commercial fishery, of the recreational fishery. There's a lot of people yelling.
Absolutely.
There's a lot, and they're yelling. I've heard. But what's your perspective on how they've been working?
So to understand the importance of the ASFMC, and the striped bass is the perfect test of the what they call the North American model of conservation or wildlife conservation, and that's based on a few principles. One meaning that the wildlife is property of everyone. It's just like
it's held in a public trust.
Public trust,
yeah,
right. And states manage wildlife that is within the boundaries of the state. The striped bass is unique in that it's a fish that occupies most of its time. It breeds and then lives in state waters. It's most of their habitat is within 3 miles from the shore.
Yep.
That's under the authority of the state that is has that shoreline.
And they run into fresh water.
They run up and do all their spawning in
right.
Estuaries, and that's the first place we see them in the spring. Is they run up, and we have a fantastic fishery in the mouth of the Connecticut River. But a regulation, that a regulation may not be favorable for people fishing in Connecticut. Or how should I put this?
Elsewhere.
Right. A regulation elsewhere,
and everyone's fighting for their own
protecting
interests.
their own interests. Yeah. And the stocks, or they say the 1995 stock of striped bass is the golden standard for where they should be. In 1995, it was a strong breeding population that would sustain recreational and commercial harvest of these fish, and they look at 1995 and say, this is where we want to be.
Yep.
And that
sounds crazy. That's 30 years ago now.
30 years ago, and 40 years ago, the biomass of fish, the whole population of fish along the eastern seaboard was the lowest it's ever been, and there was a moratorium on striper fishing back in the I want to say 1985.
And they just shut it down.
Shut it down.
And that's, again, to repeat myself, the most sought after saltwater fish for recreational anglers was, they just said no.
And we saw we saw a huge rebound in the early 90s into the 2000s, and were the numbers that are coming out of data collected by biologists down in the Chesapeake where these fish spawn is that the stock is on a rapid decline. We're heading right back into the numbers that we were seeing in the 80s.
Yep.
And so where I feel like my role in rebounding this population of fish that is so important to me and so important to all the people in this area that like to target them, is just creating stakeholders.
Yeah.
People
who care about the resource. Yeah.
So and I believe that we can only do that through education and exposure,
outreach and conversation, and a lot of, literally kind of what we're doing right now.
So absolutely. And I look at every fishing trip I go on as an opportunity to create a new stakeholder.
Yeah. I want to back up just so people have a good perspective on, because you've already laid down so much great groundwork on a really important topic, but I want people to get a good understanding of why you know all of this. Mm-hmm. So one, like we mentioned, and you kind of ran through your season, if you will, or the year of how you approach fishing. Explain to somebody who has no idea, what is a charter boat captain who explain your business from A to Z.
So I take what I would consider what I do, light tackle saltwater fishing. So I take up to 4 people out on my boat. Come mid-April, we're in the beginning of the spring run. That's all the fish that spend all their winters down in the Chesapeake Bay or the Hudson River. Those are the two biggest populations of striped bass. They go down there for the winter and they spawn in the spring. And once they're done spawning, they make a run up to their summer forage grounds. So they come up to, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine, and they spend the summer up here, and they follow, for the first waves of fish we see are following big schools of bait fish.
Right. They're chasing food.
Alewives, herring, bunker.
Yep.
And then they follow those fish up. They come up into the the estuaries, the tidal rivers, and then they kind of spread out along the the local reefs, and that's where they spend their summer until their water temperature drops back down to, some say 50 degrees in the fall, and the bait fish start to school up and make their migration out and down, and they kind of follow them out.
Yep.
And go spend their winters back down south. So we start to target the striped bass in the spring.
Where I mentioned it before,
Yep.
you're based out of New London.
New London,
you're in a marina that's on the Thames.
On the Thames,
Right.
yep.
So, and where you explain it or say it for me again. The mouth of the Connecticut River, and this will be very helpful if someone was looking at a map.
Right.
The mouth of the Connecticut River east to Block Island.
Montauk, depending on throughout the year what we're targeting, or we'll go where the fish are, where the bite is.
And so and that's all technically, which there is this definition when Long Island Sound is very much salt water in the Atlantic Ocean, but for all intents and purposes, and really a number of very good reasons, it's still the Sound because the ecosystem is different. And speak on that, because I'm like kind of aware of why there's a big change in definition between the Sound and then the water that at some arbitrary line becomes the Atlantic
It's really
Ocean.
just geography of the we define areas of water based on the land that surrounds them. So the Long Island Sound is the body of water that is kind of encapsulated by the Connecticut shoreline and the north shore of Long Island. Once you kind of exit that, that's the Block Island Sound. So that's between the areas between the Fisher's Island, the furthest eastern coast of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Block Island.
Yep.
So you go south of Block Island, now you're in the North Atlantic Ocean. Same thing with the south shore of Long Island. You go past Montauk, now you're in the Atlantic Ocean.
And a lot of this has to do with if you were to drain the oceans and look at the landscape on the ocean floor. Right. So the Long Island Sound is nowhere near as deep as the Atlantic, where it drops from the continental shelf down to the ocean floor, the true ocean floor.
And to get a good understanding of the the bottoms, and that's a big part of why the fish are here, right? Like the underwater structure creates currents, or currents kind of create these opportunistic spots over the, I guess, topography, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, no, that's nice.
And it holds bait fish, or it's attractive to bait fish.
It produces zooplankton, and phytoplankton,
right.
and then it's like your classic third grade food web all the way
exactly.
from the little thing all the way up to the big thing.
You're right. And these all of our predatory fish are they're here to eat, and they'll stay here because this is a good environment for like bait fish to come and eat. And that's an important, oftentimes overlooked component to a successful fishery. Is we always focus on like things like size limit regulations, catch and release, really plugging the importance of catch and release, and minimizing catch and release mortality rates. But that's one component. Yeah. And it's easy for recreational fishermen to villainize commercial outfits and
which
stuff.
Goes on a lot, and it goes on the other way too.
But
everyone likes to play the blame
absolutely
game.
But and it's multifaceted. It's a compilation of or a culmination of a lot of different attributes. Bait fish is huge, right? And the more you start to learn about population and trends in population of any biomass of fish, you learn about what are they eating, and what affects what are they eating,
and then what down the line is being reflected, right? And you can see it so many
things like
ways.
Pollution or habitat destruction may not directly affect something like a fish like stripers, because they're resilient fish, they're very hardy fish, but it could wipe out huge numbers of what they're eating. What that blueback herring or alewives that are they're just as equally as important to the health of a population of a migratory fish like stripers. But they're a lot harder to see because we're not fishing for them,
Yeah,
right?
looking for
I'm
'em.
not looking for
They're
them.
not these grand things.
Right.
Yeah. When you talked before about creating stakeholders and the different kind of groups that all have an interest in protecting their own interests, I think of when you drive on Route 1, I believe, Jeff, you might know this. On Route 1 down in Westbrook, there's you enter into Westbrook or out of Westbrook from either Old Saybrook or the other side. It'll say, "Welcome to Westbrook, home of the world record striped bass." You're seeing something there that's like, you might notice it and just think, huh, interesting. What they're doing is acknowledging that, and not even acknowledging, they're embracing that an enormous portion of an economy can rely on the health of a fishery.
Sure.
That people are coming there and spending money year after year. People are docking boats there. People are spending money, excuse me, spending money in bait shops, spending money in tackle shops, spending money at hotels. So it goes far beyond somebody just thinking, oh, what is a stakeholder? A stakeholder isn't just somebody who wants to catch a fish. It might just be a local economy to a place where they rely on some fishery, right?
Right.
And it's, you see those types of places. Westbrook's one example. You see them, like you said, from the Carolinas to Maine,
Right.
where it's like the economy is, and the people and the culture are centered around the health of a fishery. So it's far bigger than maybe just this like A to B that people might see of like, oh, you didn't catch a fish and that's why it's an issue.
Right.
It's a little more complex than that.
And just if I could for a minute speak to that, I'm familiar with that sign, Westbrook, world record striper came out of Westbrook. And I want to remind everyone, especially the Montauk guys, the Block Island guys, the Cape Cod guys, Connecticut is the best place to fish for striped bass, period. It's the striper fishing in Connecticut is better than any place in the country. And that's not even an argument. It's not even an argument.
One, I think, I mentioned I was having a conversation with somebody about ice fishing and living in Southern New England. And we're in Connecticut now. How spoiled we are with the opportunities. If you want to pursue so many different types of fishing, you have fantastic freshwater trout fisheries. You have lakes and ponds. You have, if you want to go up north to Maine, you have that. You have what we're talking about right now, Long Island Sound, and the best striped bass fishery probably in the country.
I'll argue that to
and then you have in the winter ice, which you're also familiar with. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you have a really cool way of going about it. It's Lake Winnipesaukee.
Winnipesaukee, yeah.
Winnipesaukee is this crazy, crazy lake up in New Hampshire. A lot of coastline on that lake. It's got a lot of ins and outs. It is nowhere near a perfect circle. You set up. What is it?
Oh yeah, we got a little ice fishing house, and it's like built on a trailer. Take it out on the lake when there's enough ice. The last couple of winters haven't been so great, but
did you get it out this year?
Didn't get it out.
No,
wasn't able to put it on the lake. We still did our plenty of days out in the water. I think we did 15 days fishing out on the ice, and it was mostly targeting lake trout. And that's relatively new to me. I've only been doing that for I'd say less than the last 10 years, but it's exciting to kind of learn a new, completely new fishery.
You're basically literally pulling out what someone could imagine as like someone's shed in their backyard.
Right. It's like a little tiny home.
Yeah, tiny home. What do you call it? Shanty? Or
yeah, they call them in New Hampshire. We call them bob houses.
Bob houses.
But it's like this whole subculture of ice fishing out there, and
you drive it out on the ice,
pull it out on the ice
for the year.
Oh yeah, yep, and move it around or try to get on the good spot, and we go up there and we fish the Meredith Ice Fishing Derby, the Meredith Rotary Club Ice Fishing Derby every year. Yep. And a really huge fundraiser for the.
I was gonna say, you told me about this. And the money involved in that
Derby
huge. Sounds unbelievable.
And the Meredith Rotary Club does a lot for that. The area, they do a lot of cleanups and stuff. A lot of real good stuff in that area for that that lakes region. Yeah. And it's just a real cool thing to do. Real cool thing to get out there and do. But like I said, the last few winters haven't been the most ice fishing friendly.
Yeah, and we'll see
seasons.
How that trends over the years, because I mean, seeing the difference between years of how vastly different ice conditions can
Right.
be depending on the weather and the climate and everything. It's
And we're coming to learn to kind of bring it back to this striper fishing. We've been seeing, I shouldn't say historic lows, but the last handful of years have had really low numbers of recruitment. That's the successful spawn of fish in the Chesapeake and Hudson area, and there's a direct correlation between harsh winters, essentially what we would consider a harsh winter, cold, heavy snowfall, and a lot of runoff from the snow, and successful years of the striper spawn. So for the stripers to have good recruitment years, we need cold winters. So the numbers will come out probably next year about the numbers of juveniles. Last year's recruitment, and out of the Chesapeake, and I'd imagine it's a pretty safe bet to say it's going to be another low year. Our last good year was 2015, and that's what this slot is protecting. So that slot limit is a moving target to protect these 2015 year class fish. And when I said earlier about if you based your whole perspective on the health of the fishery based on the last May, you would say this fishing's been great. It's better than it's ever been. Well, that's because we're catching the 2015
fish,
and those fish are now just over the slot limit, or the average size of them are just over the slot limit. So it's all about, and I find generally
tracking those like very large cycle, because it's the way it's so interconnected. I want to talk about the how it's so much bigger than just the one thing. Everyone thinks it's like the one thing, but let me just take a break first so we can say thanks to the sponsors.
The Open Trail podcast is sponsored by Urban Lodge Brewing Company, creators of amazing handcrafted beer, food, good times, and great memories, with locations in Manchester and on Pratt Street in downtown Hartford, Connecticut. And Quast Media, located in Manchester, Connecticut and Nashville, Tennessee. Quast Media is an award-winning digital marketing firm producing video, digital signage systems, and interactive digital experiences.
Hey, this is Max, host of the Open Trail podcast. If you're enjoying today's conversation, then join the conversation every week. There are full episodes available on the Open Trail Podcast YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe. On top of that, follow us on social media at Open Trail Podcast. Most importantly, I want you to get outside and get after it with the people that you love and to build your relationship with the natural world. I think when I think about really anything in the natural world, it's this is not a new idea or my original idea. I think about how it's interconnected. And I think about people who are maybe not stakeholders, who feel like they have no association to maybe the thing we're talking about right now, let's say striped bass. But I guarantee you they do. And one of the things I bring this up to people when I bring them to our families. My grandfather built a cabin in central Vermont. And I bring friends up there. I've been doing this for 13, 14 years now. And one of the things that I like to see in their reactions of learning certain things up there, having experiences up there, I'll take a stick off the ground, a little branch, and I'll throw it in the brook right next to the cabin. And this brook I say to them, that stick is going to flow 500 feet or so down the brook, and it's going to meet up with the White River. And then the White River, it's going to flow about 28 miles or so, 30 miles or so to the Connecticut River. It's then going to flow about 180 miles or something south into Long Island Sound. The number of very intelligent, educated people who hear that and go, really? Like, they are shocked to learn that water moves.
Right.
But that's when you think about like striped bass recruitment and everything you just said with a harsh winter. Snowfall at a ski mountain in Vermont has as much to do with striped bass fisheries as a slot limit does.
Absolutely.
It is not, you can't untangle them, right? And then when you talk about like the the harsh winters. Get back into that because it's such an interesting thing to hear. Like what causes that and what.
Yeah, and I'm not really 100% sure about why. I just know there's a direct correlation,
Right.
and it's something that you can see. We can see in our lifetime. You think back to with the winter of 2015. It was the last, really, as far as I can remember, the last time we had a good winter of
Serious snowfall.
good ice, good snow.
Yeah.
And you can, the last time in the data shows, the years leading up to the 1985 moratorium of striper fishing in the early 70s, mild winters, low snowfall. So we're kind of, repeating this weather pattern, the cycle that we're seeing. And, it's really easy to get all doom and gloom about the future of the fishery, the future of fishing, but we're armed with some good information and better access to real live data than we've ever had.
Yep.
So I'm hopeful, and like I said, I see my part in this as just creating stakeholders, educating people on what's going on, and it's how it's multifaceted and how there's a lot more we can do than not just catch and release fishing, but safe fish handling, the revival of caught fish that's going to be released.
Yeah, I want to get into a little bit of like how it's personal, but your professional tactics and how you go about it. But I also want to point out too that we're roughly the same age, and when talking about conservation, I tend to make the joke that it's like an old man's game. Like when you become a conservationist, when you have like time when you retire, right? And that's not totally untrue. In bringing younger people into it who are certainly passionate about the environment and they're very aware of it's like this inescapable thing around them, which is climate change. And you pointed out that you're hopeful and that you don't want to just fall into the doom and gloom. I think one of the major things is arming people with information. So it doesn't just seem like this overwhelming, unbearable thing that no one can tackle, because great science with great action following it, you can solve a lot of issues, right? And I think that it's very important to, and you do a good job, not just in what you just said, but how we've spoken about things in the past. You have a very realistic approach on what can I do? Because I'm not necessarily going to fix all these problems tomorrow, right, but what am I going to do today? Which brings me to when you're bringing people out on your boat.
Yeah.
I'll let you take it, but touch on how you're taking the opportunity to educate them, and then what sort of practices are you implementing to do your part?
So one of the first things, like the easiest way to get people to see that actions, individual actions can make a big impact is balloons. And it's funny because like we go out.
So funny.
I can go.
So not funny, but
right.
So funny.
I can go out and I can guarantee you we can fill up a bucket full of Mylar balloons that are just floating in the ocean. And I try to make a point to point them out to people because, I can tell you when I don't know a single person in high school, but I can tell you when prom is because I'm going to see some the Monday after a prom weekend, I'm going to see some prom balloons. I'm going to see some graduation balloons. Yep. And that's, we make a point to pick them up, and I can tell you I could go on an offshore fishing trip. I could fill the boat.
And I love that you bring that up because it's like the most inescapable.
Sure.
It's like nuclear warfare.
Oh, yeah.
And 200,000 years could pass with no human beings. Like someone's still going to find a Mylar balloon.
And it's an easy connection to make. I take someone out fishing. They have a good day. They love the water. They have a good time, and they see a balloon. They know that's not supposed to be here. So hopefully, next time they see a balloon floating away,
and that's
up here in Central Connecticut. Right.
That's the one thing you can
and
see.
It's hey, that's gonna land in the sound. And I always some half jokingly say we see a balloon floating up over Main Street in Manchester. I say, that balloon's going to the ocean. I'll see that balloon next month.
But when you know what a Mylar balloon can do,
right?
It's one of the most disturbing things that you could see, whether you're in the water or you're in the woods.
Right.
Right. Because they don't go away. and they end up in animal stomachs, and they're very destructive.
And it's like, yeah, you can't hike a mountain anywhere and not see one.
Right.
It's a funny example, but not funny.
So that's an easy one. That's how I can, I can turn the youngest kid into a conservationist by just pointing it out like that shouldn't be here.
Yes.
And that's an easy connection to make. And then, you said that conservation, whether it's an old man's game, it's usually people that have a lifetime of experience in the outdoors. They get to a certain age and they
I'll correct myself and say old person's game.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
That was just the phrase.
But they could
phrasing.
say, they think like, look at what this has given me. I want to give something back. I want to put some effort and invest into what has been important to me. And I think, a good way to try to instill those values in people earlier in life is really emphasize the fact that this is yours. This water, these fish that are here, access to these places are yours. They're not making more land. They're not making more water. This is what we have. And if you get individuals that take an ownership in there, where we're spending our time, then they're going to take more care of it.
Yeah, that was what I call my own like personal revelation or awakening, and I was basically handed it on a silver platter through whatever, it might have been a book, it might have been a book or a podcast, but I was probably 22 or 23 years old before it happened. I had spent so much time outside in so many different capacities throughout my life. And then it finally dawned on me, oh wait, this is actually mine. And I think you're aware of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So like I got associated with them early, and they have a T-shirt which is like tongue in cheek, but quite literally it says public landowner.
Right.
That sort of attitude that I then started applying to my own time outside and how I view public land, how I view natural resources, that we're just one moment in time on this like far grander scale, and it's not just about everything that we need right now. It changed the entire way I view things, right? And when you're out in the ocean, you're like I always think this, that it's few and far between that I'm on a boat in the ocean, but every time I am, I always have this thing in my head where I'm like, wow, I feel like a global citizen right now.
Right. No, exactly.
Because you're just like,
exactly.
It's so connected and you can't like deny it,
And that's really the importance, and this is where I see the importance of creating those stakeholders is they're catching a glimpse. They're out there for a very short period of time. And it's important for me and for the fishery that, to keep advocates for the fish and for the environment in that space, because if they enact another moratorium, there's a bunch of stakeholders that will not be spending time in that space targeting these fish and knowing what's going on.
There's also like the reality too, and I don't want to speak for you, but I like, if you're not willing to say this, I will. There's also like the really basic reality that you have invested your time, energy, money into developing a business that's centered around bringing people out to fish. Mm-hmm. So you have a legitimate interest in like the well-being of that resource in a very personal way. Like you're trying to feed your kids.
Right.
So it's like a moratorium on striped bass to one person might just be, that's weird. To you, it's like, that changes my entire life right now.
And it's really easy for me to make that connection.
Yes.
But it's important for me to realize that I need to make those connections for other people who don't, the stakes aren't as high for them. This is just something they enjoy. And, if it goes away tomorrow, it'll be sad, but there'll be something else they're going to go and do. So that's why I really focus on, getting people to care about something I care about so much. And it's beyond just, making a living or making some money on the side.
No, and I didn't mean to present it that way.
Right, because I could go do anything
you can't
else.
Not say it though, because it's like you're sitting here because you are a charter captain. So
right.
It'd be kind of silly to just like pretend like
right.
that wasn't some aspect of it,
And I'm much bigger picture stuff. I want the health of one fishery impacts, and the health and regulations of one fishery heavily impacts the health and regulations of other fisheries.
Yep.
And we saw this in the 1985 moratorium. When people stop, people are going to fish. They'll find something else to fish for. And there's you say, hey, no more striper fishing. They're going to go beat up the fluke, and they're going to go beat up the black sea bass,
Yep.
or whatever is next. And that has, impact on things on a much grander scheme too. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, we've focused a lot, and for good reason, on striped bass. But there's a wide array of species that one could target in Long Island Sound. Let me first ask, because I don't even know this. How long have you owned your own charter business?
This will be my seventh season taking out charters. But I've been fishing in the Long Island Sound as long as I can remember.
Yep. And how old are you?
35.
So it's like you're at that point now where not only have you personally experienced it for 30 plus years, but that you're now experiencing it through a very professional,
Right.
It's your job to understand it. It's your job to really know about it and to care for it, so that you, over 7 years, you'll be seeing trends. You'll be noticing trends.
And I already have, and one of the most, I'd say, daunting trends is not the presence of big fish. We're catching plenty of big stripers, but the little ones, right? The 1, 2, and 3 year fish, in September, October, 5, 6 years ago, you go on any reef in the Eastern Long Island Sound and catch schooling, 18 to 20, 22-inch stripers. You go catch and release 100 a day. And we're just not seeing that right now. And that's the future. Those are the future slot and plus slot size fish.
Yep.
So we're catching fish. We're doing well, but I'm not seeing the fish I was seeing in 2018 in the same places that they were in.
It's hard for a lot of people, I think, and I only say that because it's difficult for me to think this way sometimes, to think on a very long-term scale like that, to think what we're doing now is going to really be affecting something in 5 or 7 years,
Right.
or far beyond that, really, especially when it comes to any of these really major issues we're talking about with climate or habitat and all this stuff. Let's talk about the difference between how people have approached fishing, sort of like culturally or whatever it might be, like the catch and release, where I think that, and these are my own words, but striped bass fishing generally used to be a lot more catch and eat.
Sure.
And it has moved away from that for a lot of the reasons that we're talking about. What are you seeing for trends of people that you take out? What is their interest in keeping a fish? Are you trying to push them in a different direction if they want to keep a fish? What are you doing?
I always try to influence catch and release. We try to, what better way to protect the species than to not kill any of them.
Yeah.
But like I said, we do have this slot limit. The slot limit's based on what we have to believe is good science, and there's still plenty of people out there that want to go out and catch and keep a striper for dinner. And like I said, I'm not in the business of trying to lose stakeholders in the fishery. And if you went out and you closed striper fishing down to keeping any fish, you would do just that to a lot of people, and that's a lot of eyes on the water that aren't paying attention to what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, I take every charter as an opportunity to educate, and we're lucky in the waters we fish in. We have a fantastic sea bass and porgy fishery, and I say, hey, let's we can go and catch and release some stripers, and we can really wear ourselves out on some good striper fishing, and then always leave time for filling a cooler up full of sea bass to take home.
Yep.
And that seems to appeal to a lot of people, and
it's kind of self-explanatory what you're getting at, but what you're saying for not, I know you understand this, but there are a number of different species, like I kind of hinted at before, where their populations are doing very, very well. And so going out and targeting those species, if you want to catch, keep, and eat fish, and a lot of great tasting fish too.
Yeah,
Porgy,
oh yeah.
sea bass. I mean, really great stuff. Flounder,
Yep.
fluke. What can someone? So a lot of this talk that we're talking is kind of very technical,
Right.
and but what can somebody who wants to go out with you? What can they expect if they're a total novice? If they're a total amateur, they have no idea what they're doing. Do you look at that person and think like, stay on shore, peasant?
No. And I'm very lucky, fortunate to where we're fishing. We've got something for everybody. I kind of, I try to hone my my people reading skills. Somebody calls me up and tries to book a trip with me. I want to kind of feel them out, figure out what they're all about, and a lot of my, especially new customers, like they don't know what they want to do. They just want to go out and have a good time, enjoy the water, and catch a few fish. And
Yep.
if we can, a lot of people they want to bring home, they want to catch some fish, pull on a hard fighting bluefish or striper, and then bring a cooler full of fish home. And I'm in a spot where we can make that happen real easy.
Yep.
I also get a lot of guys who they want to go out and they want to catch a 40, 50 pound bass, and we can make that happen too.
Yeah.
And so it's like just kind of figure out what they're all about, what their experience level is, what their expectations are for going out and fishing. And we'll I can tailor a trip to exactly what their needs are.
You're going to take care of basically everything.
Oh, everything.
They don't need to.
You don't need to.
As long as they got like shoes on their feet.
That's right. Shoes and want to go have a good time. That's pretty much it.
Yeah,
That's
good attitude.
we can make it happen. I
Maybe some Dramamine.
maybe right.
Sunblock.
Yeah.
Yeah, sunblock. You're right. There's a couple of things you might want to consider.
But I mean, I take my 2 and 4 year old out fishing, every week, and so if you can reel, you're reel just as good as a 2-year-old can, then I can put you on a fish.
That's good. There you go. That's a perfect segue into the next topic. You're a father of two, both boys, right?
2 boys.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about, a lot of like your own personal ethics and bringing them out. What have you seen from them very early on? Because from what I understand is that you introduced them to this very early. What did you see in their sort of interest levels? What did they want to do? Because I don't know if you noticed, but over the last year or two, everyone and their mother had a kid.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people who are looking to get their kids involved in outdoor activities, which I don't have any kids, but I can see how it can be extremely difficult to get yourself into a situation, like to put yourself out there in a new thing while dragging along your 2 or 4 year old, right? So how do you approach it?
So everyone, when we first had, we were first pregnant with our first son, everyone, all my friends would be like, hey, what's going to happen if he grows up, he doesn't like fishing? And I said, well, that's fine. He doesn't have to like fishing, but it'd be a lot easier for him if he does, because we're going fishing. So, no, but I try to, some of my fondest childhood memories, I grew up fishing with my dad and spending a lot of time out on the water, and those were the best. And so what did you guys do?
Like as a kid, what'd you do? Was it saltwater stuff?
All saltwater. We fished out of Westbrook, and it kind of coincides with the theme of what you guys do at Open Trail. My dad moved to Connecticut in the mid '80s. He grew up in Rhode Island and didn't have a boat growing up, and he fished mostly from the shore. And he told me, he said, if Connecticut had the shoreline access that Rhode Island does, we would have never bought a boat. He's like, I only bought a boat because there's nowhere to fish from shore. And when he moved to Rhode Island, so he had a boat from
That's
as
a
long.
big thing where I need
Huge.
to talk to. There's a friend of mine, Mike Woods, who does some fantastic volunteer work for backcountry hunters and anglers, and he's a Rhode Island guy who, just studies the ins and outs of Rhode Island's shoreline access law, which was written into their constitution. It was so protected that people would have the right to target, not only to have access to the shoreline, but for the specific purpose of harvesting wild food for themselves.
Right.
So like that was a basic tenet of how that state formed. And then you have Connecticut right next door, where our shoreline is. There are places where you can access it, of course. I don't mean to say there's nothing, but
very limited.
It's very limited. Yeah, that's very true. And then that's the reality of it.
And I'm a huge fan of the work that the backcountry hunters and anglers are doing, and I it's really you look at a lot of the big fights that they take on, and you think access to public land. You think about the Wild West and things like the Corner Crossing, or access to these huge tracts of federally owned land.
Yep.
But public access issues are just as prominent here.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Things I think about, just spots to take my little kids, fishing. Go stand on the side of a pond and catch bluegills.
Yep.
And the few spots I know where we can have access or unencumbered access to our public waters, like I mentioned before, they're not making more.
No.
Right.
And I think that's probably, it's one of the biggest things that you hear about over and over, is that someone trying to find their way into any outdoor activity, it's like the where is a big part of that.
Sure.
It's like, where do I
Huge.
go where it's also realistic to do so?
Huge.
Right? Because I live here. There's a geographic barrier. I'm not going to drive an hour. I'm not going to drive 2 hours. I'm not going to, there's all these variables that come into play. So having access near you and not having that access threatened constantly by some interest group trying to take it away.
And that didn't really come into my focus, access to things like small ponds or local areas, until I was able to look at that through the lens of a father to young children.
Yeah.
And that can be a barrier to anybody,
Yep.
like to getting into all sorts of outdoor activities, hunting, hiking, fishing.
Yep.
So it's really, really important to me, and really important to kind of instill that at such a young age, the importance of ownership in our public lands with the kids. It's, we go fishing down at Bolton Lake, and on the way back to the car, fill a net with trash, and they don't understand why we're doing it. But if they can look back as young adults and say, this is something we always did with Dad, and we always kept doing it, and maybe they can start to see the why later on. But it's important, and it's important for everyone.
We're going to take a quick break.
The Open Trail podcast is sponsored by Urban Lodge Brewing Company, creators of amazing handcrafted beer, food, good times, and great memories, with locations in Manchester and on Pratt Street in downtown Hartford, Connecticut. And Quast Media, located in Manchester, Connecticut and Nashville, Tennessee. Quast Media is an award-winning digital marketing firm producing video, digital signage systems, and interactive digital experiences.
Hey, this is Max, host of the Open Trail podcast. If you're enjoying today's conversation, then join the conversation every week. There are full episodes available on the Open Trail Podcast YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe. On top of that, follow us on social media at Open Trail Podcast. Most importantly, I want you to get outside and get after it with the people that you love, and to build your relationship with the natural world. Sorry about the noise, by the way. We are in a working brewery right now, so there will be a little clinking and clanking.
Yeah, so pretty much my main focus when I take my boys out anywhere in the outdoors, whatever we're doing, just try to really focus on the fact that this is yours, and try to have them take some ownership in the outdoors.
Yep.
So that they're going to take care of it, because it's the same way I teach them to take care of their stuff at home. Take care of your bike, because this is the only one you're getting.
Yep.
Take care of the outside, and
how do they do on the boat, by the way?
Awesome.
Really?
Awesome. Oh, they love it. And
is sea legs a real thing?
We'll find out. Knock on wood, we haven't had any seasick young kids on the boat. But
I was out recently with Jeff, actually, and we were on a sizable boat, right? It was a 30-foot boat now, something like that, 34-foot boat. Watching the way that the owner of this boat and operator of this boat moved around versus me, I went 36 hours straight without, I had my hand on something the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't take my hand off of something. Not sickness, not that. It was just I couldn't keep my balance. and then I'm watching him move around as if he is a level, like he has some balance thing inside him that I don't have. And it was the first time in my head where I'm like, oh, sea legs, like he actually has them. He's not even thinking about it. He never grabs onto anything.
Yeah, I want to say my 2-year-old, he's I'd have to look back at my logs, but he's easily got 30 days on the water last year, and he's like an old salt out there. You know, he has pretty good intuition when it comes to the boat moving around. And
how many total days might you log in a year?
Yeah, it's tough to say. The goal is around 100.
100.
Yeah, so we're getting out as early as April 1st, and we'll go all the way up until December 1st.
Do you have a favorite thing at each time of the year, or do you have one thing throughout the year, one time of year that you like the most?
You know, it's tough to say because I could say, you love the fall run, but you know, I start thinking about the game plan for, you know, the first couple weeks of May, and I start to really get excited about those Connecticut River spring stripers, or, you know, I start thinking, you know, the offshore scene in July. There's always something going on, and my favorite thing is whatever's next. You know, so there's always, you know, I start thinking about the summer and my fluke spots, and kind of coming up with some game plans for that. And
when you say offshore, what does that mean to you? Because again, I mean, every single boat is limited by size and fuel capacity and the reality of time and travel. So how far out is offshore for you?
Do a couple tuna trips a year, go off anywhere from 40 to 60 miles. Yeah. You know, from the dock out beyond Block Island.
So you'll shoot over to Block Island, fuel up, and then
it just goes straight out. Yeah, we have about a nearly 350-mile range in the boat. So, nice. We've been really lucky the last couple of years of a really good inshore tuna bite. Inshore tuna bite meaning, you know, within.
Meaning you don't need to go super deep.
Yeah, you don't need to go. We don't need to go out to the canyons to get into some good yellowfin and bluefin action. And that's not really my bread and butter, but if I can get out offshore 3 times a year, that's you know, good. And that's a whole nother world in itself. And
the canyons that you mentioned, we're probably gonna, I hope to have at some point Scott, a friend of mine, on to talk about a trip we took for tuna out to the canyons. Man, it's like the Striped Bass Commission, another long name, Northeast Seamounts and Canyons National Monument.
Yep.
Is that it?
Yeah, it was. And I don't know a ton about it, but that was under the Obama administration. They made that. It's like the equivalent of a national park, but offshore. And it was like the first of its kind. But so it's kind of recognizing that as that area 100 miles offshore, the edge of the continental shelf.
Right. Where it drops down to, like I was saying before, down to the ocean, true ocean, or oceanic crust or whatever.
From shore to about 100 miles out in the northeast, it doesn't get much deeper than about 400 feet. And you hit that edge of the continental shelf, and there's underwater canyons that drop into 2,000 feet, you know, over the course of a few hundred yards.
Quickly, yeah.
And that's what we're talking about when we talk about the canyons. It's cracks in the continental shelf that, you know, about 100 miles
It's really
offshore.
like the way why it's so special too is the Gulf Stream, right? A current comes up from the Gulf of Mexico along sort of the eastern seaboard, and then as that current comes up to hit the canyons, like you can picture underwater, the water hitting these canyon walls, it creates something called upwelling. And the upwelling is pulling up all this biomass, if you will, right? Phytoplankton and zooplankton, and pushing it up to the surface where there's just this boom of life.
And on a much grander scheme, it's pretty much what's happening in the eastern Long Island Sound. And right, you get underwater structure, and in the offshore scene, sometimes that structure is temperature gradient. So it hits, you know, a few degrees change in temperature over a very short period of time is the same as underwater structure. So in the inshore scene, you get ledges and reefs, and that causes that same kind of upwelling. It's simple as, you know, in a trout stream, like an underwater eddy, or kind of similar in a much bigger stream. It causes bait fish to concentrate in an area, and opportunistic predators, stripers, bluefish, tuna and marlin offshore, to concentrate in one area, and that's the the best places to.
When we
to
were
target
out there,
them.
there was a couple of things that were just so surprising because of this phenomenon of the Gulf current, and then the phenomenon of upwelling. The temperature of the water being like surprisingly warm,
Right.
for the latitude that you're at, and the species that you're seeing, or the potential to catch species that
Right.
you look at them and you're like, that's a tropical fish.
Oh yeah,
Jeff, help me out with a couple of the species that you could catch out there. On top of, big eye and bluefin and yellowfin,
Swordfish or
swordfish, yep,
all the billfish,
mahi.
Yep, my
Fish that you like imagine I associate with the tropics.
well, you look
right?
at all the other fish there and mammals that are out there too. You see a lot of dolphins.
Yep.
You see a bunch
We
of
saw-
species of whales. You see a bunch of sharks. You know
The sharks were unbelievable.
yeah,
The hammerheads.
And
Yeah.
that really surprises a lot of people that there are hammerheads this far north. When you say, "Yo, there were hammerheads out there," and they go, "What are you talking about? That's like a Florida fish."
Or just in the middle of nowhere. You wonder why that shark, and we saw a dozen hammerhead sharks, and they're cruising on the surface, so you can
Right.
see their dorsal fin breaking the surface. And then you're just wondering, why is that? Why here? It's like, something's going on underneath.
Always
That's why.
the answer to that question is always whatever they're eating.
Yeah.
You're right. They're there for the bait, and the bait are there for whatever they're eating.
Yep.
And that's that whole like offshore world. The last few years, like an eddy, as the water warms up, an eddy spins off the Gulf Stream and it comes in, pretty close. And the last few years, we're very lucky to be getting yellowfin. You could still see Block Island from where we were catching yellowfin. Guys talk about,
This is that inshore tuna bite.
and that's
you were
that
talking
inshore tuna bite. We get all those offshore species pretty close, and we've been very, very, very lucky to be able to target them the way we've been targeting them.
Do you
the
have
last few
any
years.
overlap or any interest in, or do you ever sell something exceptional? If you catch a great tuna,
No,
are you
no.
going into market? No,
No.
never.
No, that's
It's just not what you're out there
just not.
targeting.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
Like I said, if I can get out and target the tuna three times a year, that's a lot. I'm focusing mostly on inshore fishing.
And I bring it up too because people love to. It's like the most annoying. They just notice it way too much. Tuna, yeah, it can be expensive, and sometimes in these really ridiculously specific cases, it can be super expensive. But people, they just, for whatever reason, have this impression that if you catch a tuna, like now you're a millionaire.
Oh no!
It's just like
that's
it's so wacky. I don't know.
right. I've had
That's why I wanted to address it. Like
a relatively small glimpse into that world, commercial tuna fishing, and that's far from the truth.
well, why wouldn't everyone be in on it? if it
Right.
was the truth?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Before we wrap up, can you plug your business again one more time,
Sure.
please?
You set the hook CT on everything, Instagram, website, setthehookct.com.
You booked up for this year completely? Or
Oh,
no?
we're filling up. We started booking the beginning of March, and the calendar's open and plenty of dates available for the rest of the year.
As late as October?
As late as fish all the way up to Thanksgiving.
Really?
So yep. Like I said, the spring striper fishing, we get a really good good bluefish bite pretty much the beginning of June all the way throughout the fall.
Yep.
Bottom fishing really heats up in the end of May, all the way through the summer.
Yep.
And we start targeting to tog in the fall, October 10th, all the way through to the end. So
Nice.
a lot of fishing opportunity. Real excited about the upcoming season. But yeah, set the hook CT.
We're gonna get
on
out with you,
everything.
too.
Absolutely. No, I
we
look
got to
forward
do
to
that.
it.
I think maybe May or June. But
Yeah.
I would highly suggest people book with you because of one, just a lot of things about you, but like your very calm demeanor. And I imagine being on a boat with you is because you're taking people out into a situation where you're very much in charge of their livelihood, right? There's a responsibility there. But I look at you and I'm like, man, not only is he like fun to be around, but I just trust this guy, and he's gonna, yeah, sure, get us on fish, but he's also just gonna be cool to hang out with and spend a day with. You know?
I always look at it as the business I'm in. It's fishing with friends I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And that's like the way that's what really excites me about it's never a grind. It never feels like work. And that's my goal, is to keep it from feeling like work. It's just trying to share what I love with new people. And a feedback I always get, people tell me, which it shocks me. They say, you're not you went out with this
You're not like
guy
a
here,
crabby
and
asshole.
no, you didn't yell at anybody. I'm like, who wants to go and do something where they feel they need to be yelling at somebody? And
There's a caricature that people believe of what a charter captain is, or what a boat captain is. Yeah.
And I don't understand that. And I hope I never will, but I love what I do, and I love sharing it with everybody who comes out fishing with me. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving anyone who listens or watches a good impression of the, business that you're in. You're a great representation of it. And I, from knowing you personally, I, not only would I recommend you, but I thank you for all the work that you're doing, professionally, and then everything that you do on top of that, just to push the messages that we talked about today, to be a conservationist, to push for access and educate and inform people. It's all good stuff.
No, thanks for having me on, and thanks for what you guys do with Open Trail. I love it. Stand by it.
We'll have you back
really
for something good.
No, great. Fun. Look forward to it. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.